Hello and welcome to World Konnect, your journey across continents. Last week saw two major twists in the US presidential election campaign. Hillary Clinton collapsed at a memorial service and that raised concerns about her health. And the Trump campaign finally admitted what it's been contesting for years. The ceasefire in Syria was tested. Myanmar's democracy icon Aung San Suu Kyi came a full circle, trying to lift sanctions on Myanmar years after being instrumental in having them imposed. And Pakistan was once again struck by the grim reality of terror. There were those also who were undaunted by odds and became a source of hope and food for thought for millions. We will take you through all that and more in this edition of World Konnect. Let's get started with the focus of the show. Donald Trump's campaign finally admits that US President Barack Obama was born in the US but accuses Hillary Clinton of introducing the smear against Obama. Furious Hillary hits back at Trump, calls her birther-in-chief, demands that he apologize to the US president. US-Russia brokered ceasefire largely in place in war-torn Syria, but humanitarian aid by UN yet to reach besieged areas. Blame game begins between US and Russia. Both accuse each other of not holding up their end. Aung San Suu Kyi calls for more investment in Myanmar as a way to advance its democratic transition, a day after US President Barack Obama pledges to lift long-standing sanctions on the country. Obama writes to US Congress to exempt Myanmar from high import taxes. In a fresh setback to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, a Swedish appeals court upholds an arrest warrant against him over a 2010 rape accusation, clearing the way for his questioning in London next month. American guitarist Lanny Cordola's school in Kabul teaches music to children scarred by violence, helps them cope with pain and loss. A week is a long time in politics, and if it is the contest for the next US president, the fast-paced developments of 1 week can bring in defining change. After digging in its heels for years, the Trump campaign has finally admitted that US President Barack Obama was born in the US. However, it is now blaming Hillary Clinton for the smear campaign against Obama. Hillary, who is back on the campaign trail after a bout of pneumonia, is furious and hitting back at Trump in equal measure, calling him the birther-in-chief.
Finally, the admission, though not by the man himself, but his campaign. Donald Trump is silent, even as his campaign has acknowledged that US President Barack Obama was born in the United States. The belated admission in the form of a statement comes after the Republican nominee fanned false rumors that the US's first black president was not born in the country. It's not a plain acknowledgement, but one with a twist. Trump's campaign has accused his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton of introducing the smear during the 2008 Democratic nomination contest, even though there is no evidence to back that up. Hillary hit back, tweeting, "President Barack Obama's successor cannot and will not be the man who led the racist birther movement." In April 2011, Trump had challenged Obama to show his birth certificate. Weeks later, Obama released his actual birth certificate from his native state of Hawaii and later made light of the allegations mocking Donald Trump. While the Trump-Hillary blame game may continue on Obama's place of birth, Trump did not lose another opportunity to have a go at Hillary after she fell ill during a 9/11 memorial service in New York. A video of her unexpectedly early departure showed her buckling and stumbling as she got into her van. Expectedly, Trump took a swipe at Hillary. Hillary was diagnosed with pneumonia. She rested at her New York home for 3 days and was back on the campaign trail, unleashing a sharp tirade against her challenger. Hillary got support from Obama, who asked voters to send a clear message to Trump on D-Day. Political jibes apart, there was embarrassment in store for Trump. He was interrupted by a pastor for talking politics in a Michigan church.
Trump, I invited you here to thank us for
Okay.
not
Okay.
to give a political speech.
Okay.
While that was a mild reminder by the pastor, hacked emails of former US Secretary of State Colin Powell showed his disdain for Trump, besides making clear his discomfort with Clinton. In public, though, Powell had good words to say for Hillary.
I think she was one of the unique leaders of this past century. And I think she did a great deal for our own country.
Amid all this, Trump rose in opinion polls and senior Clinton aides said they always expected the race to the November 8th elections to be close. All in all, it made for another newsy week in the US presidential contest.
Diplomats, heads of states and representatives of member countries have gathered in Venezuela's Caribbean island of Margarita for the 17th Non-Aligned Summit, an event which brings together nations not formally aligned with or against major power blocs. Set up in 1961, the non-aligned movement provided an alternative for nations who did not want to back either the United States or Soviet Union during the Cold War. Grappling with anti-government protests amidst an ongoing economic crisis, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's socialist government hopes to use the event to burnish its international legitimacy. First, the ceasefire in war-torn Syria, and now the blame game, which has laid bare its fragility. Russia has accused the United States of not fulfilling its obligations under the ceasefire agreement, and Washington has pointed the finger at Moscow for allegedly not holding up its end. The ceasefire was called so that desperately needed humanitarian aid could be delivered. While the tenuous calm may appear to be largely holding, the United Nations is still waiting to be able to deliver aid to besieged Aleppo. Nevertheless, the ceasefire appears to have offered a respite in the civil war that's killed more than 4 lakh people in the last 5 years.
The long-awaited ceasefire in Syria's war-ravaged Aleppo came into force on Monday after US-Russia brokered talks were taken to the next level. However, ceasefire violations and the blame game continues to wreak full-fledged plan for the restoration of the place. UN Special Envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, said that the government has been holding up UN aid delivery. According to the peace deal chartered out last week, the aid was supposed to move unhindered.
Humanitarian access. That is what makes a difference for the people, apart from seeing no more bombs or mortar shelling taking place. On that one, we have a problem.
UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon also urged the stakeholders of the conflict that security for the aid delivering trucks is also crucial. Russia has meanwhile said military convoys are being removed to facilitate unhindered passage of humanitarian aid deliveries into the eastern part of Aleppo. Russia and Turkey have also put Syria high on agenda while holding talks to further bilateral ties. Reflecting a warming of ties in the past few weeks, Chief of the Russian Army's General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, met his Turkish counterpart in Ankara on Thursday and discussed military cooperation and the Syria conflict. Russia and Turkey have backed opposing sides in Syria, with Moscow supporting President Bashar al-Assad, while Ankara backs rebels fighting to oust him. Even as the attacks on schools and hospitals had stopped and the UN asserted violence in the area has significantly dropped, Russia accused Washington of failing to meet its obligations under the Syria ceasefire agreement. Russian military spokesperson said that the opposition, backed by the US, has largely been involved in certain violation incidents, while the Assad regime has been strictly following it. Pentagon officials have expressed unease over the Syria truce and said that the time frame is short, but there's a gulf of trust that's larger than the time frame. Under the agreement, if the truce holds for 1 week, US and Russia will establish a joint implementation center to share targeting information for airstrikes in Syria, and the people of the country eagerly await for the long-lasting peace.
Myanmar is receiving the dividends of democracy. The United States has moved to exempt it from high import taxes that were imposed on it for human rights violations under the military junta. Interestingly, the person who was once the driving force behind getting sanctions put on Myanmar is now leading the effort to get them lifted.
What could have been a better outcome of Myanmar's iconic leader Aung San Suu Kyi's US visit than lifting of the decades-old sanctions on her country, breathing the freshness of democracy? Suu Kyi's trip capped a decades-long journey from political prisoner to national leader after her party won a sweeping electoral victory last year, with she becoming the country's de facto leader. Suu Kyi, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate and democracy icon, helped persuade the West to impose sanctions during her years as an opposition leader under house arrest. Under the military rule, Myanmar, also known as Burma, faced some of the tightest sanctions among Western powers from the United States. Most of the US sanctions were imposed in order to target key individuals and companies who supported the old military regime. Despite some easing of sanctions in May, following a democratic transition in Myanmar, more than 100 individuals and groups continue to remain in Washington's blacklist. In order to ease the pressure on Myanmar businesses and industry, President Obama wrote to the US Congress to add it to the generalized system of preferences, a list which exempts certain countries from high import taxes. The program is aimed at boosting economies in some of the world's poorest countries. Myanmar's access to trade benefits for poorer nations had been suspended since 1989 over human rights abuses. Myanmar officials are now looking at overhauling rules on new foreign investment this week. New investment approvals have fallen since Suu Kyi took power in April, and some businesses and investors have demanded more steps to prioritize the economy. Suu Kyi is seeking to strike a balance between showing her people the economic rewards of a democratic transition while keeping pressure on her country's generals for further reforms.
In explosive allegations against the Philippine president, a former death squad member said Rodrigo Duterte shot dead a Justice Department employee and ordered the murder of opponents. The self-described assassin, Edgar Matobato, told a Senate hearing that he and a group of policemen and ex-communist rebels killed about 1,000 people over 25 years on Duterte's orders. The revelations were made during the Senate, which is investigating alleged extrajudicial killings in Duterte's anti-crime crackdown. Malaysia has confirmed that a large piece of aircraft debris discovered near Tanzanian coast in June was from the missing Malaysia Airlines jet MH370. A search of more than 2 years has turned up few traces of the Boeing 777 aircraft. The debris and outboard flap will now be examined further to find the circumstances surrounding the missing plane. The plane disappeared in March 2014 with 239 passengers and crew on board soon after taking off from Kuala Lumpur, the Malaysian capital, bound for Beijing. Over 25 people were killed and 29 others injured when a suicide bomber blew himself up inside a mosque packed with worshippers for Friday prayers in Muhammad Agency in Pakistan. The attacker blew himself up when the prayers were in progress at the mosque in the Anbar Tehsil of the agency bordering Afghanistan. Rescue teams and police rushed to the spot. The injured are being shifted to local hospitals for medical treatment. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. Uncertainty has ended with the fate of the Hinkley nuclear plant project in England, with the Theresa May government giving its go-ahead for the plant after a 6-week review. The British government insisted the new plant in Somerset was only being approved with significant new safeguards to make sure China and other foreign investors could not own stakes in British nuclear plants without UK government's approval. France and China, who have pledged investment in the plant, are a relieved lot, and Britain is counting on its clean energy potential.
Months after it halted the multi-billion-pound nuclear power plant financed by French and Chinese companies, the Theresa May government finally gave the go-ahead for the Hinkley Point C project in England. The project was put on hold in July, just hours before a deal was to be signed. The Somerset reactor, Britain's first new nuclear reactor in decades, is proposed to be built with 2/3 funding from the French utility firm EDF and 6 billion British pounds by the state-owned China General Nuclear Corporation. China, in return, wants to use its design for new UK nuclear stations. The government had said it needed time to assess the contract amid concerns about the costs and the potential security impact of Chinese involvement. Opponents warned the government of potential threats to national security by giving China a big stake in Britain's nuclear power industry. They also flagged concerns about escalated costs. The decision to put on hold did not go very well with Paris and Beijing, resulting in a strain in ties with Britain. But ending weeks of uncertainty, the May administration finally okayed the project. The project now has some new terms under which the government gets the right to block the French group from selling its stake in the plant during construction and after it is operational.
I think it was right for a new government to look seriously at all the components of the deal. And what we have decided is that for critical infrastructure generally, we want to make sure that our powers in this country are comparable to those of others, to be able to check that national security considerations are taken into account.
Britain is keen to have the project, as it will deliver 7% of its electricity. It also makes the country less reliant on imported energy. Those advocating for the project argue that the low-carbon electricity will help towards the country's climate goals. The project also promises thousands of jobs and an economic stimulus.
Russia is all set to vote on Sunday in elections that would decide the constitution of Duma, the lower house of Russian parliament. While the battleground this time is wider, with more contenders than in 2011, if opinion polls are anything to go by, the election may only extend Kremlin's dominance over Russia's parliament.
Sunday's election for Duma, lower house of Russian parliament, isn't expected to change much in the political scenario. The vote is the first to the 450-seat house since a similar vote in 2011 led to street protests in Moscow over allegations of ballot rigging. The election campaign has been quieter throughout as compared to previous polls. There are fewer election posters and banners on view. Some political analysts even term it as the least interesting polls in past years, despite the fact that the polls should have been more exciting this time. A change to the law has permitted more parties to participate than in 2011, and even a handful of Kremlin critics have been allowed to run.
Surprisingly, we have more candidates registered officially for the elections, more opposition candidates, more TV debates, but generally more quiet company as compared to 2011.
The authorities have also resurrected an old voting system viewed as more equitable, which means that half of parliament will be decided by people voting for individuals, with the other half drawn from party lists as usual. Opinion polls suggest that the election will only extend Kremlin's dominance over Russia's parliament. And as things stand, the ruling United Russia Party, led by President Vladimir Putin, loyalist Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, has a majority in Duma and can easily pass any laws it wants, and there are reasons for the status quo to continue. President Vladimir Putin's approval ratings have risen. Crimea's annexation in 2014 in support of pro-Russian rebels fighting in eastern Ukraine has also widened support for the Kremlin.
In a fresh setback to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, a Swedish appeals court on Friday upheld an arrest warrant against him over a 2010 rape accusation, prolonging his 6-year-long legal standoff with prosecutors. This clears the way for his questioning in London next month. Here's a lowdown on the controversies surrounding Julian Assange.
September 16, 2016, Swedish appeals court upholds arrest warrant for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Court order paves way for his questioning on October 17th at Ecuador's London embassy. Assange faces allegations of rape which Swedish authorities claim he committed in 2010. Assange's appeal against arrest warrant turned down for the 8th time. Assange has been under refuge in Ecuador's London embassy since 2012. Swedish prosecutors will provide their questions in writing, and an Ecuadorian prosecutor will conduct the questioning. He has been avoiding extradition to Sweden, fearing further extradition to the United States. A criminal investigation into the activities of WikiLeaks is on in the United States. In February 2016, a UN panel had said that Assange's stay at the Ecuadorian embassy equaled arbitrary detention. Panel said he should be let go and be awarded compensation. Even if Sweden drops the investigation, Assange is likely to be arrested for breaching bail conditions in Britain. In 2010, WikiLeaks published over 500,000 classified US military and diplomatic documents on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq in one of the largest information leaks in US history.
Los Angeles is all set for the Emmy Awards to be announced this Sunday. Host Jimmy Kimmel rolled out the red carpet on Wednesday. The Emmy Awards are the highest honors in television. 6 months after Oscar diversity controversy, television's Emmy lineup tells a different, far more diverse story. Some 21 actors across the ethnic spectrum have been nominated for Emmys this year. Emmy organizers have shard nominations on shows like Mr. Robot, starring Egyptian-American Rami Malek as a socially awkward hacker, African-American family sitcom Blackish, Master of None, created by actor Aziz Ansari and his Asian-American writing partner Alan Young, White House comedy series Veep, and Netflix presidential drama House of Cards are among the top contenders.
Because I saw something. I saw a future.
The image of 3-year-old Aylan Kurdi washed up on a beach in Turkey woke the world up to the extraordinary risks that Syrian migrants are taking to flee to safety. But with time, it is all too easy to forget the reality of the desperate situation facing many refugees. Mexican artist Gustavo Aceves has chosen to help keep the spotlight on the perils of migration. His horse sculptures at the Colosseum in Rome depict the phenomena that creates victims day after day.
Horse sculptures took the center stage in the famed Colosseum in Rome as Mexican artist Gustavo Aceves sought to depict migration in the history of humankind through the ages. Aceves has used bronze, wood, granite, iron and marble for his 40 horse sculptures put up in the centuries-old great structure in Italy's capital. Ranging from 3 to 8 meters in height, with some 12 meters in length, they will be displayed in the public art installation entitled Lapidarium, Waiting for the Barbarians.
Lapidarium speaks about horses, it speaks about the Hellenic aesthetic, it speaks about wandering and exile. But as the backdrop to all this, there is the issue of contemporary migration, the phenomena that day after day creates victims, so many they are already impossible to count.
The huge horses will remain at the Colosseum till January next year. The sculptures of the horses are not shown in entirety to signify power and strength. With broken bits, they signify the pain of moving from a familiar spot to having to transform themselves for a new place. Some of the horse sculptures stand in boats, while others are perched on top of columns. A reminder of the many who lost their lives when they understood the perilous journey to leave home. Aceves, through these works, speaks the language of art to bring into focus the recent challenge of migration, estimated to be the biggest since World War II. Aceves draws comparisons with the past, when fear of barbarians or people who did not speak Latin or Greek gripped Europe.
Music can do what words can't. American guitarist Lanny Cordola has taken it upon himself to heal children scarred by violence in Kabul. Moved by the pitiable plight of street children in Afghanistan, traumatized by violence, vulnerable to terror attacks and devoid of education, Cordola opened a school in Kabul. His school helps such children cope with pain and loss through the healing power of music.
Unrest and tension have been in the memories of recent past in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. For children and teens here, violence has been a part of their growing up years, with images of destruction, feeling of uncertainty and recollection of losses. American guitarist Lanny Cordola moved from Los Angeles to Kabul to bring about a difference in the lives of these children. Cordola's miraculous Love Kids School now offers some of the best memories for these girls who enjoy singing and strumming the guitar. The music which makes them feel better, the music which heals.
Music is a healing force, it's a peacemaking force, it's a way to communicate things without even having to know languages. It's sort of a transcendent way of communication, and it's something that can get straight into the heart.
Some of the children who come to Lanny Cordola's school are from the streets. The rock musician opened the school after hearing the stories of 2 street children, Parwana and Khurshid, sisters killed in a suicide attack while selling handicrafts in a Kabul street corner. Cordola now helps such street children to attend proper school and provides music as a therapy to come out of their bitter pasts.
Playing guitar really makes me happy, and it takes me to my dream world. But it cannot ease the pain of losing my 2 sisters.
Lanny Cordola's vision of world peace is big, and he uses his music talents to better a small community. It is indeed a small step for the Kabul kids, but a giant leap for humanity.
This brings us to the end of this edition of World Connect. Do send us your feedback on the show. You can write to us on our email ID, which is worldconnect@gmail.com. You can also tweet to us on our Twitter handle, which is @WorldConnectDD. But as we go, we leave you with the beautiful sight of Sri Lanka's most colourful annual parades, the Pirahira, where elephants walk the streets together with traditional dancers and musicians. Thanks for watching.